Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Kangaroo Court Uncut podcast. My name is Rob Cameron, and with me is the man who has the Kangaroo Court of Australia website, YouTube channel, and now every Monday, the Uncut podcast. Shane Dowling, hello to you.
How you going, Rob?
Going good here. You've written another very interesting article over the weekend, centered around the pressure put on Antwanet Latu and the ABC around her covering, and you've unearthed some stuff that's really quite interesting and should be looked into.
So we've got the Royal Commission, and they're looking into certain things, and one of the key things, obviously, is anti-Semitism in Australia, and they're missing a few key points. And so that's what the article's about. You know, I lived at Bondi for 13 years, from 2006 until 2019, and I can tell you for a fact that the major driver of anti-Semitism in Australia is a conflict in the Middle East. Israel fighting with the Palestinians and fighting with various other countries. Whenever that flared up, the tension around Bondi would rise. Now, the reason it would rise around Bondi because it's got one of the largest Jewish populations in the country, especially when you take into consideration the surrounding suburbs. It's got the largest Jewish community in Sydney. So it would rise. So that's definitely the largest cause of anti-Semitism in Australia, the Middle East, and the fact that the people here in Australia follow it. But the second largest cause of anti-Semitism, as far as I'm concerned, is Israeli-aligned groups who are stalking and harassing people here in Australia because they don't like what they say. And that's been getting a lot of media coverage. So when that gets media coverage and the Australian public can see what they're doing, trying to destroy people in their lives, without a doubt that's causing anti-Semitism. And that's the key focus of the article. We focus on Antwanet Latu and her unlawful termination case with the ABC, where the court found the ABC sacked her because of pressure from the lawyers from Israel WhatsApp group. Now, I'll read you out parts of the article. People can go to the website and read the full article for themselves, but I'll just read you out the first couple of paragraphs, then we'll have a look at some of the messages they were sending to make sure, or try and drive the ABC to sack Antwanet Latu. Now, the article starts off, lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group members Robert Goot, Nikki Stein, Deborah Weiner and Linda Blaschke, and possibly many others, should give evidence at the Royal Commission on Anti-Semitism and Social Cohesion to explain why they stalked and harassed Antwanet Latu when she worked at the ABC, which will result in the ABC sacking her. There were, and possibly still are, 156 members of the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group. So how many have relevant evidence is unknown, so I would suggest they all get subpoenaed by the Royal Commission as witnesses. They were stalking and harassing Antwanet Latu. We all know that. She didn't know what was happening in the background. She guessed, but she didn't know. When these people are trying to undermine an employee in their workplace, what is that? That's stalking and harassment, especially when they don't know about it. It's even worse because they're not in a position to defend themselves. Now, I'll give you some examples of the comments that they were publishing, which were leaked to the Sydney Morning Herald. And I've got these in the article. Now, it starts off, Lawyers for Israel, screenshot 1. This is a screenshot of their messages on their WhatsApp group, 156 members. And Nikki Stein says, action of the day, call to action. Michelle Rowland is the Federal Minister for Communication. Please use this link to ask how Antwanet Latu is hosting the morning ABC Sydney show. Clause 4 of the ABC Code of Practice is to be impartial, and employing Antwanet Latu is in breach of this clause. She doesn't say how it's in breach, she just says it's in breach. Now it goes, please send a copy to the ABC Ombudsman, David Anderson, Managing Director of the ABC, and the ABC Board. How they got the ABC Board's contact details, I don't know. Now, Nikki Stein posts another message, needs to be done again today. It is important ABC hears, not just from individuals in the community, but specifically lawyers, so they feel there's an actual legal threat. Now, that's abusing their position as lawyers, trying to intimidate people. Now, Nikki Stein posts again, I've basically written to them and told them I expect a proper response, not a generic one, by close of business today, or I would engage a senior counsel. Senior counsel is a barrister. So once again, she's making that legal threat. And she says further in the comment, I know there was probably no actionable offence against ABC, but I didn't say I would be taking one, just investigating one. So she's admitted, in effect, that they have no legal basis. It's just a threat, intimidation, using the legal community to intimidate the ABC to sack Antwanet Latu. And she finishes off that comment and says, I have said they should be terminating her employment immediately. On what basis? She doesn't give a basis. She's admitted in the same comment she has no actionable cause. And
Shane,
Megan,
what I wanted to ask you there was those screenshots you've got, they're quite damning. So the authenticity of them and where you've got them from, just to let the listeners and the readers know how you've obtained them, because they are quite damning.
well, they were published originally on the Sydney Morning Herald back in February, I think it was January, February 2024. And that's where they stayed. And people grabbed the screenshots and shared them on social media because they are very damning. Now, Sydney Morning Herald, after legal threats a year later, we'll get into that in a minute. I'll continue to read the screenshots. They buckled after continual frivolous legal threats. They took them down, but there was no legal basis to take them down. And the way I managed to get them, you can go onto a website, Wayback Machine, it's called, and you can put in the URL of the article, and you can see the article today, but you can also see how it was back in 2024 before they deleted it. And that's how I've gotten them. So they're still available on the internet. They're still available on social media, and they're still available on many independent websites and other websites that never took them down because we never had to take them down. No one asked me to take them down. So they're still there. I've still got an article from back in 2024 with some of the screenshots, but I didn't have them all. So that's why I went to the Wayback Machine to get them all and to see exactly how the Sydney Morning Herald article looked back then and how it looks now and compare them. And I do that in this article. I compare them. So that's Nikki Stein. Megan, no last name, says, why is ABC allowing this woman to host the radio show? Nikki Stein, exactly, which is why we need to stamp it out. Stamp out what? They don't actually say that she's done nothing wrong, Antwanet Latu. They just want to attack her. Now, this next screenshot is probably the most important because it's got a guy called Robert Goot. Now, Robert Goot is very senior within the Jewish community, within the Israeli community, and he says in this, and he's part of the WhatsApp group, I understand that she will be gone from morning radio from Friday. Nikki Stein says, and dismissed from the ABC altogether, question mark. Friday is 3 days away, too long. They want to go on earlier. That's unbelievable. They think they're running the ABC. Debbie Weiner, another barrister from Melbourne, due to her stance on Israel or other reasons, question mark. Robert Goot, Israel. Now, that's very important. He's telling them the reason she'll be gone is because of Israel, not because her stance on Judaism, the Jews, is because of Israel. So they're outing themselves. That's what they're really about, defending Israel. They couldn't care less about it.
It's very important, and that's the key matter to the whole thing, Shane, is the separation between the Israeli government and the Jewish religion.
Well, that's 100% correct. And they're saying what it's about themselves. Now, Lawyer 3, another comment. It's obviously the Israel Jewish lobby at work again. And she's got a laughing emoji. So, which is, now Debbie Weiner, barrister from Melbourne, says, we are obviously terrible at it, given the amount of lousy press we get. So she's admitting their Israel Jewish lobby. But Robert Goot has in effect said they're an Israel lobby. So Debbie Weiner goes on to say, should we still write? Question mark. Nikki Stein, yes, definitely. The more complaints, the better. Robert Goot, keep writing. Now, Robert Goot is important because he's probably the most senior person within, well, that we know of. There's 156 members, so we don't know all the members. But the ones we do know of, that's from the leaked WhatsApp group. He's probably the most senior one. It's important to note, too, that Melbourne barrister Deborah Weiner is a columnist at The Australian. who also conspired with the lawyers from Israel WhatsApp group to have Antwanet Latu sacked. Because when they're writing in to the ABC during that period, that Australian, journalist from the Australian is sending questions to the senior manager of the ABC asking why they are employing her. So they're working together. Now, there's a third screenshot in the article, and I'll just skim over that because it doesn't really tell a lot. It's got Megan, what can be done to make the ABC more accountable. Linda Blaschke, we must continue to document, write, complain, and push the Ombudsman. It will all come to light in the end, and our letters won't go astray. Linda Blaschke again. Ida Buttrose replied to 7 of our letters yesterday. It's not going unnoticed. Keep writing. So they're trying to put pressure on the chairperson, which was Ida Buttrose. Now, screenshot number 4. Nikki Stein says, just got this back from Ida Buttrose in response to my email, which is a bit cheeky, threatening legal action, I know. Once again, she's a lawyer. She's admitting there was no legal basis in effect. A bit cheeky, well, she had no legal cause. And the court ultimately found that the ABC unlawfully sacked Antwanet Latu, which is further evidence that the lawyers from Israel WhatsApp group had no legal basis. Now, Nikki Stein publishes what she got from Ida Buttrose. It says, thank you for your email. The contents have been noted. I've forwarded your email to Chris Oliver Taylor, the AB's chief content officer, who was dealing with this matter. He ultimately left the company. I think it was during the course of the unlawful termination court case. Now, I've just skimmed over some of those screenshots, but I'll read you out the last one. And it's Megan. Seems like an expensive enterprise to engage in. What could she get in damages? She lost 2 days' work due to being fired. She was contracted until the end of the week. Lawyer 1. She'll probably say damage to reputation. Can never get another job, mental anguish, blah, blah, blah. Pay me $10 million. So they know within the course of reading out those screenshots, you can see they know they had no legal basis. They know they've, in effect, loaded up the ABC with an unlawful termination case. And they would have known the ABC was going to lose because they're all lawyers. They know they had no defence to ABC. Yeah. It shows they just don't care. They'll throw the whole ABC under the bus, which they ultimately did do. Now, during the course of the unlawful termination case, 9 members of the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group threatened legal action against the Sydney Morning Herald, which took down most of those screenshots. There was no legal basis to it. Now, the Sydney Morning Herald, in the article, also deleted certain sections of the article and at least 4 references to Robert Goot. And I'll read you out some of them, and that's very, very telling because Robert Goot was not one of the 9 female members of the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group who sent legal threats. So why did they delete these sections? It's unknown. And I'll just read you out, and that's very telling. Number 1, the article said, and it's been deleted, and that the Deputy President of the Executive Council of Australian Jury, Robert Goot, was actively involved in a discussion about having Latu dismissed. Now, why would they want that deleted? Because that's a very senior person at the Executive Council of Australian Jury, the Deputy President, up to his neck in having Latu sacked. That's why they want that in there. Another paragraph they had deleted. But the screenshots of the Lawyers WhatsApp group show the council's Deputy President, Robert Goot, was feeding back intelligence from the ABC about Latu's position. So he's getting intelligence from the ABC, from someone, and then encouraging people to continue the campaign at the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group. And it says, I understand she will be gone from morning radio from Friday, he wrote at 7:46 a.m. on December 20, the day Latu was sacked. Steiner responded, Friday is 3 days away, too long. So there's Goot, Robert Goot, up to his neck, communicating with someone at the ABC, communicating back to the Lawyers from Israel WhatsApp group, coordinating the campaign with an inside person. That's dynamite. He needs to give evidence that the Royal Commission, how he helped conspire to have Latu sacked. Well, the third paragraph. Goot confirmed to the group that, according to his information from the ABC, Latu's stance on Israel was the reason she was sacked. Asked if the members of the group should continue lobbying, Goot replied, keep writing. So it's her stance on Israel, what we spoke about before, is the reason she was sacked. Now, number 4, asked about this conversation by this masthead, which is the Sydney Morning Herald, Goot acknowledged he had spoken to someone at the ABC, but he could not remember who. Can't remember who. He's speaking to this person a number of times, can't remember who. Of course he knows. However, he said this did not constitute lobbying or coordinating a campaign. Someone told me that they thought that Latu had overstepped the mark and would be disciplined. What does that have to do with me encouraging that course or causing it to be brought about? He said, Alex Rivchin has given you a bona fide response to my WhatsApp message. Doesn't contradict it. I wasn't egging them on. Well, that's a lie. We know those paragraphs, when put together with the WhatsApp screenshots, show that Robert Goot is lying his ass off. And it drags Alex Rivchin into it, and he's a CEO of the Executive Council of the Australian Jury. So, once again, not only is he caught lying, but he's dragging in another senior member of the Australian Jewish community. So they wanted those paragraphs gone, and there was no legal reason to delete them. Now, in the article, I go on to talk about the 9 female lawyers from Israel WhatsApp group and their legal threats. Now, I've shown you the screenshots from the lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group. Now, when the Antwanet Latu unlawful termination case against ABC commenced in February 2025, 9 female lawyers from the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group applied for and granted suppression orders because their email complaints to the ABC with their names and contact details were part of the evidence filed in the court case. And their lawyer said they'd face harassment if their details were not suppressed. So the suppression orders they applied for weren't opposed by Antwanet Latu or the ABC. Now, the suppression orders were only against the parties in the court case and only related to the documents filed. But the lawyer wrote to the Sydney Morning Herald and in fact lied to him and said, you've got to take down those articles because we've got these suppression orders. But the articles were published 12 months beforehand. So the suppression orders had nothing to do with those articles. They were in relation to because the court case was being broadcast live on the internet and all the court documents were being published live on the federal court's website. So anyone, because it's a public interest matter, they upload the files so anyone can access them, the public. Because of that, they put the suppression orders on them. So people couldn't see, who made the complaints and whatever, etc., during the course of the proceedings. Not from some court case, not from some article 12 months beforehand. So it only related to that. So the lawyer wrote to Nine Entertainment and said, you've got to take down these screenshots and all this sort of stuff. And they did. They did. They buckled. For a couple of weeks they ignored them, but after a few weeks they buckled and they took them down. And then they really tried something which was really scandalous. They instituted contempt proceedings against Nine and a couple of the journalists who wrote the articles and also the lawyers, internal lawyers at Nine, for failing to take down the screenshots. They instituted contempt proceedings against them. Well, they didn't actually institute contempt. They filed an application for the federal court to institute contempt proceedings against these people. But they had no case. It was total and utter dribble. But what they wanted, they were hoping that they would be found guilty of contempt. Then they'd use the guilty verdict to start harassing all the other media and independent journalists and tell us, well, look, you've got to take down your articles, etc. But I'll read you out what the judge found. Now, they lost the case. The application to have the court to institute contempt proceedings, they failed and they lost it. And this is what the judge said at paragraph 45. I am satisfied that all the alleged contemptors have established a reasonably arguable case for defending the allegations of contempt. They have demonstrated a reasonably arguable case that the order only protected the 9 intervening parties and only protected information derived from material on the court file or from the court proceedings. Further, they have a reasonably arguable case that in the absence of being notified of the identities of the relevant 9 intervening parties, they could not know what information they were prohibited from disclosing. The lawyers were writing to the Sydney Morning Herald saying, take down this information. It's suppressed, but they weren't giving the Sydney Morning Herald a copy of the actual orders. So how could they know? They had to take the lawyer's word for it, which is as dodgy as hell. Because I've been in a situation where suppression orders have been issued in relation to a party in a court case, high profile one. And because I was writing about it, those lawyers sent me a copy of the suppression orders naming that person, saying, look, you can't name this person. So I knew who it was and I knew who I couldn't name. But in this case, they weren't doing that. So it was as dodgy as hell. So they had no case. Yeah. And it's interesting that the judge in paragraph 60, in these circumstances, the appropriate order is that the intervening parties pay half the alleged contemptor's costs as between party and party. So they got lobbed with costs as well. So there's 9 female lawyers for Israel had to pay half the cost. Now, the reason they wanted the court to institute contempt proceedings, they could have done it themselves, and they should have done it themselves, is because if they had instituted contempt proceedings themselves, they would have lost because it was frivolous and vexatious, and they would have been lobbed with a lot more costs because this was a cost in an application. So it's a lot quicker, a lot easier, a lot cheaper. The institute proceedings from the start and have directions hearing and all that sort of stuff would have been a lot more costly, and they would have been lobbed with costs, total costs. They probably would have had to out themselves and name themselves anyhow. And if they had a lost, that's exactly what would have happened, I suspect. Now,
I think applications for submission to the Royal Commission closed yesterday, Shane, so we will wait and see what will happen in this case, but certainly you've put a very good case forward that they should be appearing before this Royal Commission.
Well, that's the bottom line, they should. If the Royal Commission is going to investigate anti-Semitism in Australia, well, they've got to look at all the causes. Number one cause, the conflict in the Middle East, the ongoing conflict, and the fact that the UN said that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza. 70, 80, 90, 100,000 people have died. Palestinians have died in Gaza now. So when I was living in Bondi, you'd have, uprisings of various sorts in the Middle East from time to time, Lebanon, Palestine, etc. But they'd only be minor in comparison to what's been happening over the last couple of years. So you'd fully expect that anti-Semitism would grow a lot more in Australia than it has previously. But that's one thing. They've got to look, the Royal Commission has got to look at these groups getting around stalking and harassing people. It's not just Antwanet Latu, there's plenty of others. You've got Grace Tame. Now, she's been getting silenced by various groups, anonymous groups, been closing her down. So they should also call Randall Abdel Fattah, the writer from the Adelaide Writers' Festival, where they wanted to silence, they wanted to kick her out of the Writers' Festival. It ultimately ended up closing down the whole festival because most of the writers withdrew. So they're not just talking Antwanet Latu, it's Randall Abdel Fattah, it's Grace Tame, and there's quite a few others. Some of them they've instituted proceedings against, some of them they made frivolous and vexatious complaints to the police about. There's this ongoing campaign, and people see that in the media, and that caused a rise in anti-Semitism because it's an embarrassment to the Jewish community. It should be an embarrassment. And you'll see people in the Jewish community even say that from time to time.
Yeah, well, certainly the Jewish community is split very much on this with their views. Some are quite embarrassed by the behaviour of the government of Israel, which is totally disconnected from anything to do with the Jewish religion, and that's an area it should be focused a lot more on. You certainly opened up another can of worms, Shane, and it's another classic watch this space case. And I think this subject will remain in the news for quite some time. So this article you've written in the conversation we've had today is hopefully going to help a lot of people work their way through this situation, which is clearly a bit grey and murky, but I think you've provided some clarity today.
Yep. Now, if they want the full background, if people want the full background on the lawyers for Israel, there's people saying, oh, there's a 10-year suppression order, you can't name them. Well, I can't breach that suppression order because it's only people who had access to the court files and had access to the unredacted court order would know all the details. So they're the only ones who can breach the court order, as the judge said. Well, he said they've got an arguable case. The only reason he said they had an arguable case is because the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group, the 9 of them, could have potentially instituted contempt proceedings themselves. So he didn't want to hand down a finalised judgment. But the reality is, the only people who can breach that court order is them. So, but some people on social media are saying, oh, you can't name them because there's a 10-year suppression order. Well, that's not correct. And if they want the full information, which I read out some of it, they can go to an article I published on the 20th of July 2025 titled Lawyers for Israel's Big Loss in Court Against Nine Entertainment. And that deals with those suppression orders and the fact that it was dodgy and the fact that they tried to abuse them, to have people falsely charged with contempt, etc. And I think that's important because that's what I believe is ultimately happening with the Royal Commission. You've got a Royal Commission going, is hearing limited evidence, and they're just looking for some findings that they can use as a stick to belt others. Now, that's what they wanted with the contempt proceedings. They wanted a finding of contempt against Nine and a couple of journalists and a couple of in-house lawyers, so they could use that as a stick against other media to silence them. Because they hadn't given an actual copy of the unredacted orders to Nine, well, we don't know who's protected. So instead of just 9 people being protected, you actually, in effect, got the 156 members of the WhatsApp, the Lawyers for Israel WhatsApp group being protected, because they could just say, yeah, they're protected without actually providing evidence that they're protected. So I think that's important because I think they're trying exactly the same routine with the Royal Commission. And well, we're about to find out. I think the findings are handed down in October for people who want to know. That article I just published, I filed that on Sunday as my submissions, and I offered to give evidence if they want me to. I don't think they'll be calling me anytime soon. I don't know if they'll publish my article. They publish a lot of the people who are filing submissions. They publish their submissions, but I don't think they'll be publishing mine for some reason.
Well, Shane, if we've got anyone who's listening for the first time today, where can they go to find more of the work that you're doing?
Oh, well, they just go to my website, Kangaroo Court of Australia, or the Kangaroo Court of Australia YouTube channel.
Thank you very much, Shane. My name is Rob Cameron. You can find me on 94.7 The Pulse, Geelong Community Radio on Wednesday mornings. We cover on this type of stuff and other local issues. But it's been a pleasure to be with you today, Shane. Thank you.
Thank you. Talk to you next time. Now, I'm an independent journalist and I'm 100% crowdfunded from viewers like yourself. And I've been running a campaign over the last 20 odd weeks, which helps finance the work I do, publishing the Kangaroo Court of Australia website and YouTube channel, and now this podcast. And I'll read out the details to you. 29 weeks ago, I launched a campaign with a simple goal: find 200 new monthly supporters so I can keep doing this work as a fully independent journalist, running this website and YouTube channel without corporate backing or paywalls. Since then, 183 wonderful people have stepped up and become monthly supporters. That's huge, thank you. We're now at 17 to go. If you've been enjoying the work and aren't yet supporting monthly, I'd be incredibly grateful if you consider joining them. Here's the situation. Like most independent journalists, I'm basically a one-person small business. Right now, a lot of us are feeling the squeeze, just like many small businesses and households are. To stay afloat and keep bringing you the reporting I do, I need roughly 200 or more people, or 17 now, chipping in whatever they can comfortably afford each month. Anything from $3 to $100 or whatever works for your budget makes a real difference. There's no lock-in. You can cancel or adjust at any time. That feels doable right now. You can see all the donation options on the donations page on my website. And I'll put a link to the donations page below this video on YouTube. Your support, whether it's a monthly donation or one-off donation or just sharing my work, what helps keep independent voices like this one alive. And please do your bit and help shine a light on corruption and share this video on social media. And please hit the like and subscribe button and notification button on YouTube. That way you get notified when I publish new videos. Other than that, thank you for your time and have a good day.